The opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Eastlink TV, its sponsors, or partners.
So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the challenges that we face on a regular basis in the water wastewater division, as well as talk to you about some of our program updates, some of the things that are going on. We have a number of new initiatives that we're planning and that we're involved in, and also some things as we move forward, which you can look forward to in the future. And just a bit as we get started, to let you know that really the water wastewater division was sort of born as part of a reorganization at City of Greater Sudbury in 2005. So we're a relatively new division, about 6 or 7 years in the making, and we've been making huge progress, and that's largely because we have I'm very fortunate to have a very committed team working with me, some great people, some great young people, and a very dedicated staff that take their jobs very seriously. As you may have heard, we have a number of challenges, and the top of that list is really our fiscal sustainability. Sudbury is a huge geographic area. We have $2.3 billion of water wastewater assets in this community, and we only have 160,000 or so people to pay for those. That funding comes from about 45,000 water wastewater accounts that we have. So that's one of the driving factors in a lot of the things that we do in water wastewater services. We also are working very hard to maintain quality of service. We're dealing with aging systems. Many of the pipes that are in the ground are averaging about 46 years old, and that's in the sort of latter stages of their lifespan. So enhancing capital renewal programs is a very important part of the work that we do. I talked about quality, and on the drinking water side, we're very proud of the quality of water that we produce at the tap. One indication of that's tangible that we can show you is the fact that if you look at the history of drinking water inspection scores, the Ministry of Environment does very rigorous inspections of all of our facilities, and for the last 2 years we've gotten that perfect score of 100% on all of our inspections. So I think that's a real testament to the commitment of the staff and how well they're doing, meeting all of the regulatory requirements and so on. And this is a product of a lot of hard work from all of our people involved with our sampling, our water production, and the supervisory team over there as well. On the wastewater side, we're very committed to environmental protection. It's not lost on us that Sudbury is a city of lakes, that we have over 300 lakes, and a lot of our wastewater activity is targeted at providing effective service and giving proper treatment to all of the wastewater before it's released to the natural environment. So that's a big commitment that we're making to the community. And again, we have a great team in wastewater. They work very hard at making sure that the effluent is properly treated before it's released to the environment, meeting all the standards. So in terms of fiscal sustainability, just back to some basics. Many people aren't aware of this, but water wastewater services are funded primarily by user fees. And we have a small amount of funding that we get through the taxes from the Fire Protection Fund. And that amounts to a very small percentage of our annual budget. But primarily the users of water wastewater services contribute to funding to provide our services. Here's where the money goes. Our budget is around 61 million or so annually. And this is the pie where the money goes. As you can see, the largest section of the pie there is the capital infrastructure renewal. And one of the things we're constantly working on is trying to make sure the rest of the pie is as small as possible, and that capital infrastructure renewal piece of the pie is as big as possible. And we know that we need to grow it. We know that that's an important activity given the fact that we have an aging system and an infrastructure gap. So that's sort of, our team is sort of unified around making sure that we're developing operational efficiencies in the various sections that we operate, so that we can make sure we put as much money as possible into that capital infrastructure renewal, so we keep our systems, our piping systems, and our plants operating effectively. One of the complications that we have, given that we get our funding from the users of our system through consumption, water consumption, it drives most of our funding. And as you can see, since 2006, so for the life of water wastewater, we've been losing some consumption and losing revenue. So if you look at the history there since 2006, we're losing about 330,000 cubic meters of consumption revenue annually. People are using less water. And so what does that mean to us? Well, that means that water's approximately $1 a cubic meter, so we're losing $330,000 of water revenue, and of course, on the wastewater side, the water revenue drives the wastewater revenue, so we're losing, a little bit more than $330,000 on the wastewater side. So this is complicating our lives as we try to reinvest more into our systems. We're actually doing that with less revenue. We're not the only ones. This is a provincial trend and actually a North American trend, and I do apologize, the data stops at 2010, but it does show you the trend here is that we're sort of in good company, because pretty much everybody is dealing with consumption declines across Ontario and across North America. Our best comparator, if you look at the bottom part of that graph, Thunder Bay is virtually right on top of our line, and they're a very similar city to us. They're a northern community. They're similar size, and etc. And so they're dealing with, all our colleagues are dealing with sort of similar types of issues. Some of them produce a lot more water than us because there's a bigger population, but they're going down as well in terms of their consumption. So what are we doing about it? Well, one of the things we're doing about it is we're working on our system sustainability. In 2010, we worked very hard. We got a financial plan completed. It's a big study that looked at the value of our assets, our infrastructure assets, and defined a strategy for how much funding we should be putting into those into our annual program for capital renewal, so that we can maintain the sustainable systems and make sure that they don't decline to the point where it affects our service. There's a big concern for us because those pipes, whether we can afford it or not, each year those pipes are in the ground, they continue to age. And so that's something we really can't stop too much, and we just have to deal with that. So capital improvement projects are obviously the key to sustainable services. We've got to renew that infrastructure in some way. So some of the things we'll be talking about today are the strategies that we're using to stretch those infrastructure renewal dollars. In terms of our financial plan projections, and everybody's sitting down except me, so that's great, because as you look at this graph, the red line shows you where we should be, and the blue line is kind of the projected line of our sort of actual. If we keep spending at the levels that we're spending now, or funding now, I should say, the blue line is sort of showing you where we are. So what our financial plan tells us is, by the year 2021, we should have an annual capital renewal program of around $65 million each and every year to put money back into our systems to renew those systems. And obviously we have a gap there that we're going to be working to address. Another complication that we're dealing with is depicted in this slide, this graph. And the blue, of course, is drinking water. This is our drinking water production over the last few years. And the red shows you the wastewater production that we're using there, the amount of wastewater that we treat. And when you think about this, it's really inverse. I mean, when you think about the water that comes into your house, or that you use coming into your house, a lot of that might go to the garden, to water the lawn, to wash the car, those type of activities. So really the wastewater should be less than the drinking water that you bring into the house. And of course, we see that it not only is it not less, it's much more. And so that's a real complication, is that our funding is driven by the water. And so our funding is driven by water. So when we have these higher wastewater volumes to deal with, and that's really a complication for us, it really does make our job more complex. And we know the reason for that. This graph shows you some of the reasoning behind that. We see again, the blue line is the water production. We have a trend line superimposed on that, and the red line is wastewater. But if you notice, we've added here annual precipitation. And you can see just how closely the wastewater production volumes mirror the level of precipitation each year. And we call that the response to rainfall. And it's really not something that's supposed to happen. The wastewater system should really be independent of the rainfall, because it's not meant to treat any rainfall or convey any rainfall. It's meant to only convey wastewater. And so on a rainy year or rainy day, people's wastewater habits really are no different than on a sunny day. So obviously we have a problem, and we're going to talk a little bit about where this extra water comes from and what that does to our operation. On the water side, we worry about non-revenue water. There's many areas where we lose water that we produce before it goes through somebody's meter, and we get revenue from it. So we have two kind of broad categories of non-revenue water. One is the authorized consumption, and the other is water losses. So authorized consumption is things that we need to use to run our plants in our community. Firefighting, that's authorized consumption. We're not going to make them pay for water but we don't get any revenue for that water. We have a number of other types of, when we have to flush lines or when we have to do cleaning and so on at our plants. None of that water, we don't get any revenue for any of that water. And the other losses that we see are more concern, actually. We have some leakage on our transmission and distribution mains. We have leakage on service connections. And unauthorized consumption is also a problem. And then metering inaccuracies. As meters age, they get less accurate as a general rule of thumb. And so that's another concern to us, because every drop counts, but every nickel counts in our operation. In terms of non-revenue water, some of the activities that we're involved in to try to minimize the amount of non-revenue water is we have our metering task force, and that targets distribution system water theft. We have leak detection projects. Of course, we deal with water main breaks. Many communities have a service standard. If there's a water main break on a street, they'll get to that water main break, or they have a service standard that they start repairing that break in as long as I've heard of communities that take as long as 4 days before they start repairing breaks. We sort of go at it as soon as we know about the break. We're 20 minutes, half an hour later, we're on the job there trying to fix that break and mitigate any water losses. We also do water main lining and replacement, and of course water main swabbing. These are all ways that we reduce non-revenue water. In terms of our metering task force, we see a lot of instances these days where people tamper with their meters, and we have some staff that are involved with a program to detect meter tampering and follow up with administrative penalties and a recovery of lost revenue. And this photo shows you a meter that's been disconnected from the metal base. So in this house right now, at this point, they could be filling their swimming pool or using water to whatever extent they want, and the meter doesn't know. The meter's not registered, right? It's not connected to the base, so it doesn't know anybody's using any water. So all the water that this house is using right at this point is going to be free for them. So, and when it's free for them, that increases the share that the rest of us have to pay. So we think it's a fairness thing. So we're taking this very seriously, and we're trying to find as many people as we can that are taking that tactic to save some money. So if we look at the 2012 data on our meter tampering, we have over pretty much close to 200, I believe, 100 incidents of meter tampering, and we recover typically up to $2,000 per account. So in 11 and 12, 2011, 2012, we recovered over $300,000 of lost revenue from meter tamperers. We've also installed bulk water dispensing sites. In the recent past, large water trucks that use the water for various purposes, dust control on when they're doing capital projects, a number of those type of things. They used to fill up at hydrants, and that was an uncontrolled situation that was really not comfortable. So a few years ago we installed these bulk water dispensing sites, They have backflow protection because we don't know that that truck might have had its last load of creek water or lake water, and so now they're filling up from a hydrant. In the past, this was always a problem of system security for us. So right now we have improved security and control because these systems are equipped with backflow protecting devices, and there's no way that any contamination in that truck can come back into the system when it's connected to our system. And it also gives us an increased source of revenue. This is a very convenient filling system for these people. Those high volume hoses, etc. They can fill up quicker, and of course time is money for many of these private entrepreneurs. So they can fill up quicker, but we do charge a different rate for them in recognition of the special service that they get. So it is an increased source of revenue for us. On the residential side, it's a very similar issue. We have these systems that are backflow protected, where people can access municipally treated drinking water for their own purposes, and we have 3 of these, and we're constructing a 4th in the west end of the city that are currently active. You just press a button, the water gets distributed, 12 months a year. In terms of leak detection, and we have an operations engineer that's focusing on a lot of these remedial programs. Leak detection is a very important part of our non-revenue water control program, because in the picture we see a little minor leak. So when you think about a minor leak, well, you think, well, maybe there's not that much water that's being lost there, but a hole as small as 3 millimeters in a water main that's charged at 40 psi can leak nearly 10,000 liters of water in a single day, each and every day that it goes undetected. And so over the last couple of years, we've pretty much covered most of our system with leak detection programs. And in 2012, we found, we did the northern end of the city, so the Valley area, etc., Valley Capriol. And we found about 10 leaks were found during 2012, and of course we repaired them, because these small leaks like this, what they'll do is as that water continues to spray out underground, it'll eventually erode the granular material that supports the pipe and cause a void, and that's going to turn into a water main break that's expensive to fix. So if we can get to them quickly when they're just small leaks, we win a couple of different ways. So this is a program that we're going to be continuing to do on a regular basis, is continue to go over our system and check for leaks and make sure that we repair them as quickly as possible while they're still small. So despite our best efforts, I wouldn't say we're losing the battle, but I would say that we continue to fight the battle with water main breaks. And this is a long-term trend graph since 1981. It shows you the number of water main breaks annually that we have. And the trend line there is the black line, and it shows you that we're on a gradual increase. And that's logical. That matches up well with the theoretical knowledge that we have that says the older that system gets, the more problems we're going to have with the system. Those pipes are aging, and they're going to be more fragile as they get older. So it's not a surprise that as it gets older, we have more breaks. Now there are annual fluctuations there that we see, and that's also driven by weather. And so a lot of times we see the weather has a great effect. I mean, in 2011 we had a very good year. 2012 we had a good year. Only 79 breaks, I believe, 78 or 79 breaks. And so, but if you remember last year, we had a mild winter. There was not as many dramatic freeze-thaw cycles as we had this year. And so it was a very favorable year. So despite the fact that our overall trend is increasing, we have these nice surprises. This year we had a different winter. We had a real winter this year, what we call, and a lot of those major freeze-thaw cycles, +2 one day, the next couple of days, -26, things like that. And seemed like every time we had one of those freeze-thaw cycles, we had 6 or 8 breaks. So this year we're up around 50 breaks, despite the fact we had 79 for the entire year last year. So far this year, we're only a quarter way into the year pretty much, and we're at 50 breaks. And so breaks are a definite issue. One of the things we have to remember is that breaks are very costly. It seems like a small a small change. The graph is modest, has a modestly positive slope for some people, in some people's perspective. But you think, well, if we have an extra 35% breaks in the 2010 or 2012 era than we did in the 1980s, well, that doesn't sound too bad. But you know, it costs about $30,000 to repair the average break. So that extra change now is adding about $300,000 of extra cost to our annual operating budget. And it's uncontrolled. We have to fix all the breaks that happen. It's not something we can say, well, you know what, we're out of budget, we'll just leave that one run for a while and leave those people out of water. We have to fix them all, and so that has a scary effect on our budget. So one of the ways we're really working hard to rehabilitate our system or renew the system for perhaps less money than totally replacing a pipe, is we've been doing some water main lining. And again, it's a program that our operations engineer is managing for us. And it's much quicker than a full replacement of a pipe. Has a smaller impact on the environment. You know, we're excavating much fewer spots, and the excavations themselves are smaller as well. And so with water main lining, it requires much less time. We can congest traffic. Traffic is much less congested, and again, that's good for the environment and good for our budget as well. So here's an example. You can see the before picture where the pipe is on the left is showing the products of corrosion on the interior of the pipe, and as they age, the cast iron pipes tend to build up these products of corrosion from the many years of being in service. And so that gives us a couple of problems. It's a water quality consideration that we have to think about, and as well, it makes the water harder to pump. It gives greater resistance to the water as it's trying to travel through that pipe, that roughness of the inside of the pipe. So it's undesirable from a couple of perspectives for us. So water main lining helps us. In the water main lining process, they would scour the inside of that pipe, remove those products of corrosion, then install a liner that seats up against the new clean interior of the pipe, and it restores the flow carrying capability of that pipe, as well as keeping the integrity of that pipe good for many, many years. And so a lining project is a cheaper, more effective way in some cases that we can renew our infrastructure. So that's one of the ways we're trying to really stretch those infrastructure renewal dollars. In some cases, though, the full replacement of water main is the appropriate replacement technology. In many cases, we need to pipes are either beyond the state of repair that's appropriate for lining, or we have structural concerns perhaps, or we need to upsize that pipe to make the adjustments for the fact that the city has grown around the pipe from the time that it was installed, maybe 60 years ago. And so we would take advantage of the opportunity to either upsize that pipe or right-size that pipe in some manner. We also do water main swabbing as a method of controlling our non-revenue water. And this is, some people in the room here may have received a notice similar to this. When we're in your neighborhood, we would put press releases, and then usually the day before we do a swabbing on your street, you're going to get a notice like this in your mail that talks about the specific time and so on of the service interruption that will happen, so that we can flush and swab the harmless sediments that have accumulated in the piping system over the years. And this helps us to improve the quality and clarity of the water, and also swabbing and flushing helps to reduce the number of discolored water issues that people would call us and have a concern because their water seems to have a discoloration. And that therefore reduces the need for frequent or continuous flushing in various neighborhoods, and helps us to keep our non-revenue water to a minimum. We talked a lot about wastewater, and we're going to start I'm glad everyone's pretty much finished eating. We're going to get more into the wastewater side, and I don't know, various people have various levels of sensitivity, so we're going to have some, what my daughter would call, nasty pictures here coming up, so get ready for that. So we talked about the wastewater flows being higher than the water flows, and why is that? Well, that's because of inflow and infiltration, or extraneous flow. So that means that we have clean water coming into our system that really doesn't belong in our system. And there's problems. That creates problems for us. It overloads our sanitary systems because they're just meant to convey wastewater. They're not to convey wastewater and rainwater and runoff water and snow melting water. So that gives us a higher risk, not only us, it gives all of us as a community, because really our water wastewater systems link all of us together from the standpoint that they're really your systems, and we operate and maintain them on your behalf, but they're your systems. And so we're looking at, as part of today, one of the things we're looking to make apparent to more people is that we have to work together to really have an effective system. We can't do it by ourselves. And as you see the rest of the presentation, that will become more and more apparent to you. But if we have these connections and inflow and infiltration, it gives us a higher risk, and all of us a higher risk of flooding, spills, and treatment bypasses to the natural environment. That's something none of us want to see. We treasure our lakes, and the people that work for us in water wastewater services, all of our team members are very well tuned into that, and we're trying to protect that natural environment at all costs. So, and it also drives up our costs. Treating that rainwater or roof meltwater as sewage is a costly thing. It joins the rest of the wastewater in the pipes, and we can't tell the difference. It comes into the plant and it's treated as if it's, you know, full wastewater. And it doesn't even need to be treated in the first place in many cases. So this is a costly thing, a very expensive way to get rid of our rainwater. This graph depicts just what the impact is of some of those sources of I&I, whether they be rain leaders, whether they be cracks in some of our infrastructure. So there's really private and public mechanisms or vehicles of where the rainwater or the groundwater gets into our system. But this graph really shows you in a nutshell what it does to when it gets in our system. So I'll just explain a little bit about this graph. The black line at the bottom shows the sort of base rate. So these pipes are in the ground, they're open pipes, and they're not totally sealed. I mean, we try to have as best seal as possible, but there's always some level of infiltration that gets into those pipes. So the black line shows you sort of the base flow, the flow that's always in those pipes. And then the sort of darker, so let's call it medium blue, I guess, from the medium blue line, wavy line at the bottom shows you the raw sewage flow in that system. And so it varies, you know, at different times of the day, so you see it going up and down. And then the dark blue line coming down from the top depicts a rain event. And in this flow monitoring example, it rained, I guess, 30 or 40 millimeters is my recollection. And then the sort of light baby blue there shows you the impact of that small rain. That rain event looks like it lasted about an hour and a half. And it's a really small amount of rain. And we see the impact on the system there where it peaks the system flow and the going up, let's say, about 8 times what it would normally be. And so that often would challenge the capacity of either the system or the plant. And keep in mind, this was an hour and a half rain event, looks like. And so if it was like a 2-day rain event or a 4-hour blast of heavy rain, chances are that wastewater system is going to get overwhelmed. And it won't be able to accommodate all of that volume of rainwater on top of the base flow and on top of the sewage flow. So what happens? It starts to either surcharge and back up into people's basements or into spills into the natural environment. So it's important that we limit the amount of rainwater that's getting into our systems. And we can test for rainwater where points of entry where rainwater might come into our system. And one of the ways we do that is by smoke testing. So we have this harmless kind of smoke that doesn't harm anybody. And we have a way of putting that into the sewer system, and it comes out in areas where the rainwater can get in. So we have some examples of that. So I can show you on the picture on the left, we see that the smoke is coming out of a couple of catch basins. And those catch basins shouldn't be connected to the sanitary sewer system, they should be connected to the storm system. So that's something we have to fix, or we did fix. We see in the picture on the right, it's coming out around the manhole, and it either means that we've got cracks in the manhole, or there's an area there where if the smoke can get out, the water can get in. So this is an easement where there's a pipe under the ground, a sewer pipe under the ground, and obviously, again, smoke coming out. So there's a point of entry for rainwater coming into our system, or snow melting water, whatever. And around houses, we see a couple of examples where we have someone's clean out for their weeping tiles is leaking smoke. So that's a hint to us that, guess what, they're connected to the sanitary sewer. And again, when it's coming out the eaves troughs, guess what, they're connected to our sanitary sewer system. So that's one that really gets my goat, because you know what happens. I'm picturing all winter, and every time it rains all summer, guess what? The rain coming off that guy's roof is being treated at our nearest sewage treatment plant, you know, at $1 something a cubic meter, and it's rainwater. It should be going on his grass so that he doesn't have to water his lawn as much and so on. But this is a real problem for us, and so it's something that we're targeting with our, and I'll explain a bit with our source control people as we get into the presentation. The other thing we do is that, you know, we realize that on the public side of the system, there's routes of entry for rainwater and groundwater to get into our systems. So we look at our pipes with either a zoom camera or a closed circuit TV camera, and we pass that through the pipes, and it allows us to see problems with the pipes. And this pipe is a good example of that. You can see in the top left, the pipe's cracked. And on the bottom right, there's some white stuff there. That's grease. And this pipe needs to be fixed, and it needs to either be lined or replaced, because it's a route of entry for groundwater or rainwater. So this one is particularly in this is a video from our trunk sewer that is depicted in the red on the right. You might recognize that area. It's the big marshy area, and you see Adanac, Ski Hill, Cambrian Arena. There's Cambrian Arena. Oh, sorry, Barrydown Arena, the old Barrydown Arena. And Felix Ricard School, I believe, is here. So it's that big swampy area that is in behind, on the other side of the Kingsway, between Notre Dame and Barrydown. Maybe I can get that video going again. Back? Okay. Oh boy, previous. Anyways, I don't want to end the show here. So the red areas, that's the pipe. The video shows you what's happening in that red section of pipe. And that's okay, yeah. I'm going to go next, that's all, thanks. So it's something that we're moving to fix as quickly as possible, because, you know, we have, you know, I think about 900 kilometers of sewer pipe right in this city. And so it's scary to think that some of them are leaking that much water into our system that we're going to be treating at our wastewater treatment plant. And so that's a real problem for us, and it's really expensive for this community. So again, Paul's our operations engineer, and he's working hard at getting all of these things repaired. And this is a depiction of sanitary sewer lining. What the plan is for the section of pipe that we showed you is we can stop it from leaking by installing a structural liner within the existing pipe. And that requires less excavation, reduces greenhouse gas emissions for the excavation process, and facilitates repairing that pipe quickly and effectively. And it does restore the structural integrity of the pipe. So even though you see in the picture the pipe's in sort of bad shape in that diagram, it's an epoxy type product that has epoxy with it, so it has structural strength when it hardens, and restores that pipe to the integrity of that pipe. For maintenance access holes, which, you know, I've been around for 30 years, as Jennifer said, but we used to call them manholes. Now we call them maintenance access holes. But on the left, we see one that needs rehabilitation. It's probably cracked and leaks groundwater if the groundwater is high enough. And we have a rehabilitation technique that we spray an epoxy type of product in different coatings and different layers, and restores the water tightness of the sides of the manhole, so that, or the maintenance access hole, so that it doesn't leak any more groundwater into our sewer system. So this is another rehabilitation technique that allows us to stretch our capital dollars and do more with less. So in the past, we didn't have access to those. That technology really didn't exist when it wasn't effective. You used to have to just dig up that manhole and replace the whole concrete structure. Now we can just do this spray liner thing, and it gives us a longer lifespan to the existing structure and restores the integrity, so it's not leaking any water into our system. I brought in this picture here, and actually the guys helped find this picture. It's from 1961, and they're doing the old type of replacement is just straight on replacing the pipe, and it shows you the type of conditions that 1961, how excavation, fairly straight sides and so on. It's kind of risky, and but sanitary sewer replacements, they'll reduce the full replacement will also reduce the infiltration and inflow problems. And in many circumstances, we can't. The condition of the pipe is just not even good enough to do a structural lining. It needs to be totally replaced. So every method has its place, and we continue to do some replacements. So as we work on our system sustainability, one of the other things we're doing is we're working hard at operational efficiencies. We have a number of themes for progress. We want to be making positive changes to our work environment. We want to do more with less, and we want to think strategically. So we have a good example of that in the photo, where we're using our vacuum truck to do what they call hydro excavation, and it's a new excavation technique in our arsenal of tools. And we're also combining that with a round trench box. And so you can see one of our workers in the field working to install the round trench box, and that has a number of advantages for us. First of all, it gives us improved safety for our workforce, and that's always, job one, safety. We want to make sure that our workers are protected when they're working on our behalf. But it also gives us a very small excavation footprint. And if you look closely at the photo, you can see that the asphalt has been cut to permit the excavation. I believe this was a valve replacement that we were doing. And it's a very small footprint. You can see someone's actual foot and leg in the picture, and you see the size of the excavation in the asphalt is very small. Allows us to use the trench box to go down and work in a safe way. And of course, when we do these excavations, we're responsible for repairing not only the valve that we fix, but also the roadway. So it helps us to reduce the cost of our excavations. So we win in several different ways using this method, and we're using it more and more now wherever we can manage to have it in our arsenal. And in our water treatment plants, and wastewater treatment plants, we're working very hard. These are huge plants. At the Sudbury plant, we have over 2,500 horsepower of pumps that pump the water from our raw water pump station 100 feet underground where the rock tunnel terminates at the base of the plant, and pumps the wastewater up into the plant for treatment. And so those pumps are very energy efficient. We've just replaced a number of those pumps. They're 525 horsepower pumps, and but we're digging further into energy efficiency. And we've been working closely with Sajeev, the city's manager of energy initiatives, to take advantage of various senior government programs and incentive programs to help us find ways to save energy and actually move on those energy saving measures as quickly as possible. At the wastewater plant, you can picture, 525 horsepower pump is definitely taller than I am. It's about 4 feet in diameter. In my recollection, they're huge, and it's amazing to see these things in action. The power cord on them is probably 4 inches in diameter. And so they generate a lot of power consumption. As well, our blowers, one of the ways we treat wastewater is by encouraging aerobic bacteria by pumping air into the wastewater in something called aeration tanks. And those blowers can be real energy hogs. So we're moving quickly to replace the blowers with the most efficient ones that are on the market today. And of course, we have many different plants that we have to move forward on, but certainly the Sudbury plant is our largest plant. It's the most energy intensive plant, and we're working there first because we have the greatest opportunity to make savings there. So we're hoping that our energy reduction upgrades are going to lead to very significant reductions in energy use that will help us either offset the the theoretical cost that we all hear energy is going to increase in the future, and we can either offset that cost or actually bring the cost down is really our hope. Everyone knows as well that we have 69 lift stations in Sudbury. We took 6 off the books with an extension to the rock tunnel, but we still have 69. And the lift stations, those 69 lift stations, pump as well. And many of them are in series. So because of the geography in this city, we have to pump the sewage sometimes up to 6 times before it makes its way to the sewage treatment plant. So the more efficient we can make the energy, the pumps in those, the more energy efficient we can make the pumps in those lift stations, the more money we can save. And so we're working hard to make sure that those pumps are very energy efficient, maintained effectively so that they're in proper condition, and that gives us increased reliability as well as energy efficiency. And of course, we're working hard at our SCADA system. And the SCADA system it's called a supervisory control and data acquisition system. And that's what our operators use to control the various plant processes in the plant and in the systems, not only the wastewater system, but also the water system. This is a screenshot, so this is what the operators look at when they're managing or they're operating the pump station at the Sudbury Wastewater Treatment Plant. And it has all sorts of data on there that allows them to monitor and control the pumping that brings the raw sewage from the rock tunnel into the Sudbury Wastewater Treatment Plant for treatment. So they don't actually have to go down there. They can see what's going on and they can manipulate what's going on from the control room. That allows us to manage our staff very effectively. We only have one individual that basically can manage the wastewater system from the control room at the Sudbury Wastewater Treatment Plant for the entire Greater Sudbury. On the water side, we have a similar situation where we have one individual during off shifts and so on that really manages all of the pumping operations and processes the drinking water at for all of Greater Sudbury's drinking water plants. So this is a very effective way to do it through new technology. So now we're getting into the part that I talked about, the squeamish part. And we have a source control program. Source control is the way that we control a number of problematic aspects of what we might get into our system. The cheapest way to control things is at the source. So we call a source control program for wastewater. And some of the things that we want to focus on wastewater source control are fats, oil, and grease. We call it FOG. And there's a picture there showing what happens when grease gets into a wastewater system. There's a pipe, and you can see the capacity of that pipe's greatly diminished because it's pretty much charged with grease. The latest thing that we see now is the non-dispersible flushable products that I guess they're flushable. They make it down the toilet, but I'm going to show you what happens. They don't disappear when they go down the toilet. They just get clogged up in our pumps and our system. And so we'll show you what happens and what that imposes on the wastewater team in terms of keeping the system working while it's trying to get plugged up by all these supposedly flushable products. We also try to control contaminants and, of course, high extraneous flow rates, and we also control hauled liquid waste through this measure. So our source control program statistics are displayed here. We have a source control bylaw officer. His job is to work with the regulated community to make sure that they're meeting the terms and conditions of the sewer use bylaw. And his name is Dave, and those of you that are from the business world, if you haven't already met Dave, you're probably going to be meeting him in the near future. His focus and our focus is on voluntary compliance. We want to work with the regulated community to encourage them to be in full compliance with our sewer use bylaw. And we're finding that most people, once they're aware of the requirements of the sewer use bylaw, are more than happy to comply. And we're seeing voluntary compliance at a very high rate for anybody that we are dealing with in most cases. Despite that, we see a 51%. In 2012, we saw a 51% non-compliance rate with the terms of the sewer use bylaw. That's up 15% from 2011 as Dave meets with more and more of our regulated community. He's finding some issues. Now, many of those might be administrative things about not having records of their pump outs for their grease trap and so on. So I don't want to alarm anybody. Although he has been finding some serious violations, a lot of those things are administrative, and so they're getting corrected through voluntary compliance. And it's part of that partnering that we're trying to encourage with the community, because we can't do this by ourselves. We can operate the system to the best of our ability, but if people are abusing the sewer system, we're not going to be able to do our job properly, and we're going to disappoint everyone, because we're going to have backups, we're going to have spills to the environment, and we're going to have high costs. So as part of our source control program, we also have an array of fees. Some people discharge, some people or businesses discharge, have discharges into the sewer system with characteristics that are, or parameters that are higher than we would normally expect to see from domestic sewage. So it costs us more to treat their discharges than it would a domestic sewage. So we have some mechanisms in the bylaw that allow us to recover the costs. This is a user-based system, so if you use more cost, therefore the user should cover that cost. So we have volumetric charges for overstrength sewage that we're working with people, and they're actually relatively modest, but they do recognize the fact that if you use more, if you demand more from our service, maybe you pay just a marginally more to make sure that you cover the cost that you're generating. So this is how Dave's been spending his time, and Dave's been a real asset to our department. We've had him here since I believe late 2010 or 2011, and right from day one he's been a huge asset to our department. This was sorely needed in this community, and we can see that how he's been spending his time. Most of it's been on inspections, and inspections mean education and outreach, because most people aren't aware. They just take water, wastewater for granted many times, and they're not aware of some of these things. So part of his job is to meet with the community, explain to them the requirements, and again, like I say, we've been really happy to see that most people, once they're aware of the requirements, move very quickly to voluntarily comply with them. He's been spending a bit of his time on investigation, and I guess that eaves trough issue is also something that to target extraneous flow has been occupying a lot of his time. So just to demonstrate some of the consequences of fats, oil, and grease when it gets into our system, it reduces the sanitary sewer system capacity. And you can see the clean sewer pipe on the top photo. That's what they're supposed to look like. And one that's been impacted by fats, oil, and grease could be upstream users that don't have grease traps, or that residential customers that just, maybe they cook bacon, they just dump it down the sink, and they think it goes away, right? It just, when you put something down the sink or down the toilet, it goes away, but it really doesn't go away. It goes into our sewer system and sticks to the pipe and clogs up the pipe. And it also clogs up the pipe that connects their house or their business to our system. And so many people are finding that they plug themselves, and even though we don't have any issues with our system, their sewage from their home can't make it into our system because their service lateral gets plugged with grease. And it creates a higher risk of backups and spills to the natural environment. It increases our operating and maintenance costs fairly significantly, because we have to have staff that go and clean these sewers on a regular basis. And it reduces the life cycle of our sanitary sewer system. One of the ways that, one of the devices that's designed to prevent grease from entering our system is a grease trap. And it's a bit like, the diagram shows you, it's a bit like a septic tank from the standpoint. It gives the opportunity for some solids to settle, and it captures the grease before it goes out with the water. But you can see in some cases, it can add an expense to some businesses. So in this case, this business owner has, instead of having regular pump outs of their grease trap, they've chosen to install a 2x4 to press down on the lid so that it would press down tightly and the grease wouldn't ooze out of there onto the floor. So these are the type of things that Dave is finding and correcting, because when it's charged with grease like that, the rest of the grease is making its way into our system. So this is what a grease This is looking into a grease trap that's just ready to be pumped out. It's full, it's ready to be pumped out, and this is a good actor. This is a good conscientious business that Dave was working with, and they said, okay, when your grease trap's ready to be pumped out, give me a call. I want to see how it works, and I want to take photos. So this is what we want is people to do this grease trap maintenance on a regular basis, so they keep the grease out of the sewer system. We also want to control contaminants. And there's a variety of contaminants that can enter our sewer system that really often will pass through, like toxic chemicals. We don't really have anything at the sewage treatment plants to eliminate toxic chemicals from the waste stream. So it passes through the plant into the natural environment. So again, source control means that the best way to stop toxic chemicals from making their way to the natural environment is to stop putting them at the source. And so when you put things down the toilet, it doesn't go away, it just goes somewhere else. Also, heavy metals can be a problem from various different businesses and sources. Personal care products, everything from hair dye to different types of personal care products. And various wipes, disinfecting wipes and all of that, baby wipes. And pharmaceuticals. Medication doesn't belong down the toilet as well. It's really not a garbage can, and if you use it as a garbage can, there's going to be environmental consequences to that. One of the big concerns lately is we're starting to see that's we call emerging issue, is the flushable consumer products. And they're very convenient. I mean, we probably all in this room all use them, but as you know, my training was environmental, and anytime I hear about anything disposable, that has an environmental footprint associated with it from my perspective. And we can show you just what that environmental footprint is. So while they're convenient and they have a place in our society, we need to have regard for what they do to the sewer systems. Disinfecting wipes, diapers, diaper liners, they call them flushable now sometimes, makeup remover wipes, feminine hygiene products, dental floss, and they even sell flushable kitty litter now. And what we need to remember, though, is when we flush these things, they may flush down the toilet, but they don't go away. They just get caught in our sewer pumps and our sewer system. And we have to remove them before they go through the sewage treatment plant and bring them to the sanitary landfill. So we're thinking that, well, why don't we just put them in the garbage and they'll get brought to the sanitary landfill. We can eliminate all the middleman and all the extra cost. So if people would just use these and throw them in the garbage rather than flush them, that would be our preference. So again, we have to partner with the community. We have to rely on people in the community understanding what happens to these products and the issues that they create in the wastewater system, and their good judgment to put them in the garbage instead of flushing them down the toilet. So toilet paper is meant to go down the toilet, and it disperses very readily. So after a short time of stirring, if you see the toilet paper going into this beaker, this is from Portland, Maine. They did a big study, and so we borrowed some of their diagrams and data because we don't have the resources to do these kind of studies, but it's the same here as it would be there, I'm sure. So toilet paper goes into a water beaker, they stir it for a short period of time, and look what happens. It disperses, and it's not going to clog up our pumps, it's not going to clog up our sewer system, and it's going to be able to be processed with the wastewater. But here's a non-dispersible baby wipe. Look at the difference. So they put it in, I think after flushing for 24 hours in this photo, it still looks like the minute they put it in there. It's made to hold together. It's made so it doesn't come apart. And toilet paper, once it gets wet, is made to come apart easily because they know it's meant for a sewage system and it has to be pumped, etc. But these baby wipes and those other types of wipers like that, they're made to hold together, because if not, it's not going to be much good to you. Your hand's going to, once it gets wet, your hand will pass right through it, and you're going to end up regretting the fact that it's not going to be a pleasant experience. So, but what's the impact in the sewer system? And one of the things that I also want to mention is that the other thing that a toilet is not supposed to be used for, it's not a garbage can. It's not supposed to be used for syringes disposal either. So, because what happens when we put non-dispersibles into our sewer system, they get into our pumps and they have to be taken out, or they clog the pumps. So this isn't our jurisdiction. This is a photo from another jurisdiction we took off the internet, but no different here than there. somebody has to pull all that stuff out of a pump, because if not, the pump gets plugged up and then the pump can't pump anymore and the system starts to back up. And when it backs up, it's going to fill up all the pipes and back up into either basements or spill to the natural environment. There's no other place for that water to go. So we see a risk of clogged pumps, and that leads to an increased risk of overflows, and it'll plug up your household plumbing and increase risk of your household plumbing also backing up. It costs us labor to respond to these plugged problems and causes plant equipment failures because those pumps just can't pump effectively. And just think of the energy that they're using, the extra energy as they're partially clogged and still trying to pump wastewater. And of course, many places now are installing new capital investment. We have to install, if we can't eliminate these and control this problem, we're going to have to install choppers or grinders in not only in our plants but our lift stations to stop these products from clogging up our pumps. So like I was just reading on the internet yesterday that, in one community, one lift station, to install a grinder in one lift station or a chopper to chop these things up so they don't cause these problems, was $185,000. So you think, well, that's great. That's a small town. They had one lift station and it was a huge impact on their budget. We have 69 lift stations and 10 treatment plants. So if we start spending just that $185 to put choppers in, just think about millions of dollars that's going to cost our community. So these products properly belong in the garbage. They're going to the landfill site. So let's just put them in the garbage so they go there right away. Don't have them travel through all of our 908 kilometers of sewage treatment piping and our sewage treatment plants and then go to the landfill site. So part of the study in Portland, Maine was they said, well, what is the nature of these products? Like, what's the composition of these various products that are clogging up their system? So they found that paper products, like paper rags, are very popular now, 42%. Baby wipes, again, a lot of people seem to really favor those. Baby wipes, 24%. In the lower left, feminine hygiene products, 17%. And flushables, another 8%. And there were smaller amounts of household wipes, cosmetics, medical supplies, hand, face, body products was 1%. So these are the type of things that cause issues. I mean, one of the other things we see as a real issue in our community is dental floss. And who would think a lot of people tend to dispose of their dental floss down the toilet. And so what happens with the dental floss is it goes through and it either gets caught in our pumps at our lift stations or it gets caught in our rotating equipment that, the clarifiers have big skimmers that rotate around on a very slow, and it has a big shaft, and the dental floss wraps around that shaft, and it's a very expensive. We have to take that clarifier out of service, and eventually it'll wrap around it enough that it starts to inhibit the mechanism from rotating, and so we have to take that clarifier out of service. That reduces our plant capacity to some extent, and then we have to our workers have to cut all that dental floss and pull it off that shaft, and it's like a big picture, like a giant fishing reel of dental floss, and dental floss is pretty tough stuff. It's hard to cut and it's hard to get off there, but so sometimes it takes actually days of cutting dental floss off our rotating equipment, and it's very costly. Be a lot less costly, more environmentally friendly if people would just put it in the garbage. And so basically the message that we want to get out to the community is that if it's not toilet paper, it shouldn't be flushed, because if it's not toilet paper, it's not going to pass through the sewage treatment plant processes and piping, and it has to be removed. So again, this is an internet shot. It's not a local piece of equipment, but we have similar equipment that's meant to intercept these things before they go into the sewage treatment plant, take them out, and look at the mountains of non-dispersible, supposedly flushable products that are being accumulated. It's actually mountains of the stuff. And so what happens, we'll have to transport that into luggers, and it brings it to the sanitary landfill site. So we'd much prefer that people just would put it in the garbage in the first place, and it gets to the sanitary landfill site quicker, easier. I mean, it is a way to dispose of these things, but it's a very expensive way, and adds a lot of cost to the water and wastewater services. So moving on to hauled liquid waste, there's about 15% of our community that's not on municipal wastewater service. So they have hauled liquid waste. They have septic tanks and on-site sewage system, private sewage systems, and so our source control program also deals with hauled liquid waste. We see the typical septic tanks system with a drain field servicing that house. And of course, those people are very tuned into these flushable issues and all of that, because their own localized system could get plugged up much quicker than our system. But we talk about disposal, and we have legacy disposal systems. And so over the years, many years ago, since many years ago, we've had these disposal sites. We have the city, through its solid waste department, operates 3 disposal sites for hauled liquid waste. One of them is in Dowling, and this is a picture of it. And one is on Dryden Road in Wanapitei, and we have a photo of that one, and you can see the products of those septic haulers. And I think the biggest one is in Valley East, near the Valley East landfill site. So these are sort of legacy systems that I'm sure just the photos would indicate to all of you in this room that we want to move away from. And what we want to move toward is a modern septic tipping facility that is connected to one of our sewage treatment plants, and we're planning for a sewage tipping facility to be constructed at the Sudbury Wastewater Treatment Plant, so that the septic haulers would, like this fella, it's an internet photo from another community, but look how happy he is. He's not going to pollute the environment. He's proud that septic is going to be treated before it's released to the environment to the full extent of our plant process. And that septic tipping facility is going to be constructed as part of the biosolids plant construction. And we see a photo of our mayor with Minister Clement and as part of the announcement of the fact that we were able to secure some federal grant money for our biosolids facility. In terms of our fiscal sustainability, always returning to that, we looked far and wide, and we uncovered every stone possible to try and find the most economical method for constructing and operating that facility for this community. And so we were able to leverage some significant federal programs to help us pay for that. And biosolids are really processed wastewater solids, the solid component of the wastewater stream that comes out of a plant. The liquid component goes into the receiving stream once it's been treated as effluent. The solids need to be taken away as well. And so right now we take those and we dispose of them at the valley tailings. But biosolids are going to be processed into solids now that will meet specific disinfection criteria, and they're going to be suitable for widespread land application. And so these are photos of actually the biosolids. So currently, as I said, we go to the valley tailings. The new facility will take the solids, or the sludge as we call it, and create a Class A biosolids that's suitable for land reclamation and land application. And so it enables the transition away from the legacy disposal at the valley tailings ponds, and will hopefully address the long occurring odor issues near those areas. So source protection is another important initiative, and so we had source control on the wastewater side, and now we're back to drinking water and we're talking about source protection. So just as the controlling contamination at the source is the most effective way and cheapest way to control contamination of our wastewater systems, the cheapest and most effective way to control problems with our drinking water is to start at the source. It's part of the multi-barrier approach in Ontario's drinking water safety net, and we have very strong legislation now that enables source protection. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Source protection is really a watershed-based approach, and people have been working on source protection since about 2007, I believe, and the program has largely been in the planning phase up to this point. And the planning phase has been led by our Conservation Authority, and we've been working closely with them to plan the source protection effort. Implementation is about to start, and that's going to be by various stakeholders and primarily by municipalities. And here's a little bit about the program process. We started with the terms of reference in 2008, moved on to the assessment report. A lot of science went into that, looking at mechanisms for contamination. and how they could be, how they would potentially, what are the threats to our drinking water supplies, and then developing a source protection plan to help deal with those threats and mitigate those threats. And implementation is about to start. We're waiting for the final approval from the government that would trigger implementation. Threat activities are going to be things like solid waste, sewage and stormwater, agriculture and pesticides, road salt, snow storage. These are all things that could adversely impact our drinking water. Fuel storage and other chemical storage. And on the quantity side, water taking and recharge issues. And who would have thought, as part of this process, they've done a lot of science, and they've had hydrogeologists and teams of people. And who would have thought that our Valley Capriol well system is under a quantity threat? I mean, we think of Sudbury, we have lots of water, but people in the valley need to realize that the valley aquifer is has been identified as at risk for water quantity issues. And so that's a revelation that's sobering to all of us. We think that we have an ability to mitigate that, but there we go. This process has really added a lot of value, and I think it's going to continue to add value as we move to implementation. And what source protection mechanisms are really looking at vulnerable areas. And so about 10% of the planning area for the City of Greater Sudbury is going to be affected. It's 10% of the planning area, or the livable area within City of Greater Sudbury is classed as vulnerable areas. And these vulnerable areas are normally located around municipal water sources like wellhead protection areas and intake protection zones. And it's based on various factors of what could happen to the water. So as an example, this is the Valley and Capriol wellhead protection area depicted. And we see the concentric rings that are based on the time of travel and how long it would take a contaminant to make its way into the drinking water supply if it was spilled in that area. So this shows you, it gives you a bit of a feeling in terms of the significance of the science and the effort and the planning effort that went into this. It's a really well-designed program that's going to really serve us very well for the many years to come. Interestingly, this is a Ramsey Lake intake protection zone, and the intake protection zones here are really the pink and green area as well as the light green area. And it shows you just the far reaches of that intake protection zone, because what they call IPZ3, or the light green area, reaches out to the Kingsway, encompasses Minnow Lake, many parts of the community that we wouldn't normally associate with being within the watershed of Ramsey Lake. So it's important that we really become even better stewards of those areas and have regard for the activities that are taking place within those areas. So in the implementation phase, it's all about protecting drinking water sources. And there's policies in the source protection plan that are designed to mitigate the threats and make sure that those threats are no longer going to be viable threats to our drinking water. Some of the policies are legally binding, and they affect local activities that are occurring in vulnerable areas. And the implementing bodies are responsible for making sure that those activities cease to be threats. And of course, we'll be reporting, and there's a strong linkage during the implementation phase to the Source Protection Authority, it's the Conservation Authority, to make sure that we report to them, to make sure that we're living up to the expectations in the plan. So the way the plan deals with threats is that they have policies that are designed to mitigate the threats. Some of those policies call for Part 4 tools, such as risk management plans, outright prohibition. So a good example of that, we were thinking yesterday, a good example of that might be, if I was planning to build a brand new gas station, I really shouldn't go next to one of our municipal water wells to locate that gas station. It's not an appropriate use to be so close to a municipal well. If there's ever a spill or a problem, it's obviously going to impact the drinking water next door. So that's an easy one to digest. But all new development will have to be screened to make sure that it doesn't have a policy implication for drinking water. And there's prescribed instruments. There's going to be amendments to some of the C of A's, how we run our sewage treatment facilities and so on. Land use planning, official plan, ties to the official plan and the zoning bylaw, and education and outreach. And there's also specified actions that impose certain things on the city that we would have to, so for example, clean the winter sand from the areas close to Lake Ramsey first, or early on in the process, so that we make sure it gets, before it gets washed into the lake, we make sure that we remove it, just to protect that lake even more. So it has a number of local implications, and it's been a real pleasurable experience for us as people involved, and really infrastructure services through water wastewater has sort of been the lead on the implementation. But we've been working very closely with our internal partners, EarthCare Sudbury. Everyone there has been very helpful, and they're going to be helping us to comply with some of the policies. People from growth and development, the planning area, and so on. Our GIS department, community development, and emergency services, they've all really gotten on board the source protection bandwagon, and are really working. We couldn't do the job effectively without that collaboration from our other departments, so it's really much appreciated from water wastewater. It's going to lead to some new infrastructure, things like salt domes. You need to have that salt covered so that some of the salt doesn't get washed away with the rainwater into our watersheds. So there'll be new infrastructure, new operating procedures, and somebody's got to pay for this. So there's going to be some modest new fees, I would think, brought forward to council at some point that will cover the cost of the additional work that needs to be done to protect our sources of drinking water. And of course, we have risk management, and we have our risk management inspector here today, Jessica, sitting over here, and so we have our risk management inspector. We have risk management officials now working at the city. I'm actually one of the risk management officials, and these are designated we're all designated as provincial officers, and we have special MOE accreditation. We had to take some courses and meet certain standards, and it gives us new powers now, and we have actually some significant powers. We have the authority to enter property and cause work to be done to make sure that the drinking water supply, sources of drinking water in this community are protected. And we also have the authority to issue notices and orders. So those of you that haven't met Jessica, she will be largely the face of source protection, risk management for the Greater Sudbury hopefully for the next many years. And source protection elements are risk management plans. These are things that everybody will hear more about as we move into source protection. Risk management plans, there'll be prohibition of certain activities that have been acceptable in the past in vulnerable areas. Additional screening of permits and applications, of building applications and development applications. There'll be some enforcement and compliance. There'll be new bylaws, and again, fees targeting cost recovery, and a lot of increased community awareness programs that are going to be education and outreach to make people aware of how important it is to protect their drinking water supplies for not only now but for the future. So moving forward, we've got some pretty exciting things we're working on. We have a water wastewater master plan now that's started, and that's going to help us to target our renewal money and our capital reinvestment money where it's going to do the most good for the future. One of the things we want to look at with that master plan is it possible to rationalize the facilities? And that means reduce the number of facilities that we use to service water, wastewater customers in this community. We have 9 sewage treatment plants, actually 10, but 9 sewage treatment plants that are sort of active. And whereas maybe Toronto, I'm not sure exactly, but they might have 2 or 3 to service millions of people, and we have 9 of them to service 165,000 people. So we're going to look for opportunities to reduce that $2.3 billion of infrastructure that we have to reinvest in and maintain. Is there opportunities to make fewer larger ones that are going to be cheaper to operate and maintain over the lives and feed their life cycle costs? We're also working very closely on system optimization projects. And that's to reduce chemicals, to reduce energy, to reduce the cost of operating our facilities to the bare minimum, so that we can devote more and more of our funding to the capital renewal of our systems. So that fiscal sustainability piece is high on our forefront of our imagination. We're working hard at keeping those costs down. And the other thing I want to talk to you about is as we move forward, just as a last thought perhaps, is that shared responsibility. Is that more than many other city services, water and wastewater services depend on our customers. And as we saw clearly here with the flushables and different things like that, we can't do the job alone. If we're gonna have effective and efficient water wastewater services, we need to have a buy-in from our community and partner with the community as much as possible to share responsibility for our shared services. I mean, they're really your systems, and we're just operating them on your behalf. So if we work together, we can do a better job for reduced cost by making sure we work closely together with the community. So we're going to be trying to do more and more education and outreach and develop that shared responsibility with our customers.